we're joined by the wonderful Daniel Priestley, who's going to speak to us about resetting your company and then reinventing yourselves out of a recession as well. Really glad to be partnering on this series with Purpose-Led Performance as well. A wonderful organization who really help organizations put purpose at the epicenter of their businesses as well. So I'm sure most of you know who Daniel is. He's an incredible author of 4 books, oversubscribed, one of my favorites, and truth be told is probably the reason we're all here with Birmingham Tech. It was one of the inspirations for me setting up the organization and putting on Birmingham Tech Week last year. And he's also an entrepreneur, helping fantastic businesses around the world with strategy, with marketing, and everything else in between. So Daniel, I wonder if you can just kind of give everyone a bit of an overview to your life and your career so far.
So a quick overview is that from age 19 to 20, I was very lucky to be part of a fast growth startup business in Australia. So I was employee number 4. Within 2 years, we had 60 employees and about 6 million of revenue. And it was a MBA by fire, I guess you would say. It was just a very fast, crazy time. It was 70-hour weeks. It was 1 weekend off a month type thing. We had the tiger by the tail, and it was a incredible learning experience. In year 2 of that, I ran a division of that business. I couldn't believe it. I was 20 years old running a $750,000 little startup within a startup. And then I went to my boss, asked for some shares in the company. And he said, if you want shares in a company, why don't you go start your own company? And I was like, wow, okay. That was not how I expected that to go. But then I did go off and start my own company, and it took off as well. I copied what I had learned. I started a company when I was 22 years old in Australia, which went from 0 to $1 million in its first year, and then 1 to 10 million in the couple of years after that. So it was very fast growth in Australia. When I got out of that, I came to London in 2006. And for a while, I brought international speakers from around the world to London and ran some great events. The Palladium Theatre in London, we had 2,000 people come to a leadership conference that we put on, and did some work with the Dragons from Dragon's Den. We raised £250,000 for Peace One Day, which is a charity about peace and justice. And we built a patrons program for Peace One Day. And then in 2010, I launched an accelerator, which is called Dent. We run the Key Person of Influence program. Herman was actually on cohort number 3 back in 2011, I think. And he's on this call. And essentially since then, we've grown into a global growth accelerator. We've got an office in Toronto, in Sydney, and in London. We have 3,000 companies we've worked with over the last 10 years. And we have a great ventures portfolio. And then I'm also the CEO and founder of a few other businesses as well, but that's starting to get complicated.
You've clearly got a wealth of experience, Daniel, and when it comes to kind of entrepreneurial kind of endeavors and kind of business and strategy, it's great when things are going well, but of course right now we're living through a time when disruption is putting it lightly, right? So one of the things that I know you and I were talking about before this call is this notion of being able to reset, take a step back and really kind of assess things and then look at kind of the business from a first principle point of view. So I wonder if you could just kind of take us through that kind of reset philosophy.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's important to know that pretty much every 10 years, there will be a massive global or economic adjustment or a shock. So before this one, we had the global financial crisis. Before that, we had September 11 and the dot-com bubble. And then you had, the fall of the USSR and the 1987 stock market crash. So pretty much every 10 years, you've got a major event. And then on top of that, in your own personal life, pretty much every 10 years, you're going to have a major event, whether it be having children arrive or having someone in your family who's unwell, or losing a major client or having a major falling out with a co-founder. All of those kind of things are the kind of personal situations, not from the general economy, but they deeply affect your own business. So one thing as an entrepreneur that seldom gets talked about is you've really got to be able to take a punch in the face. That is just part of entrepreneurship, whether it be from the economy or from your own personal situation. You've got to be able to take the blows. So when they come in, when a big punch comes through and you get that big, disruption, you essentially, there's two things that I always like to go back to, which is first principles and original intention. First principles is essentially asking the question, what are people trying to get done through me? What are they trying to get done in the world? So here's an interesting first principles thought. In the last couple of months, we've seen the valuation of airlines drop through the floor, and we've seen the valuation of Zoom go through the roof. And what's actually happening is, from a first principles point of view, the reason people were getting on airplanes was not because they love airplanes. It's because they love face-to-face meetings. They have to have face-to-face meetings with certain people. So when they can't do that through airplanes, they go back and say, how else can I achieve that same goal? And they go and have a conversation about, well, okay, I could do this through Zoom. So it makes total sense from a first principles point of view that airline industries would go down at the same rate that Zoom would go up. So when we look at first principles, we ask ourselves the question, not what do I do, but what problem do I solve? What is it that I'm able to help customers to get done in the world? Because you might have been running a lot of events, but that might not be why people were coming to you. So you've got to get to the real, most pure, authentic, real reason as to why do people come and talk to you? What problem in the world are you trying to solve for people? That's first principles. Original intention is, why the hell did you start the business in the first place? So you and I both know a person who has started a business because they want to live around the world. They want to have great locations and meet people in different parts of the world. So because she's very clear on that original intention, she builds the business to fulfill that outcome. Some people want a lifestyle business. Some people want a performance business. A lifestyle business is about fun, freedom, flexibility. Performance business is about valuation. And making a huge impact and disrupting an industry. So you've got to kind of get that original intention. What do I want out of this? So what problem do I solve for others, and what problem am I trying to solve for myself? Are the two big questions you want to ask when you get disrupted. And normally disruption is actually a really great opportunity to get better answers to those two questions and get better results in those two questions.
Absolutely. And I think kind of we've already seen kind of COVID be a catalyst for many organizations repositioning themselves as well. And, when it comes to technology, I think that people often get it wrong, where they look at it as the solution instead of understanding the problem. And I think kind of going back to that first principle of really kind of going, what does the customer want? What is it they need?
Yeah.
What are their rational drivers? What are their emotional drivers?
Yep.
Is integral, right?
It's the people who create the best products are the ones that are slow to build the product, and they're fast to figure out what the market wants, and they're tuning into the customer more than the tech.
Daniel, can I ask why you started your business then?
So for me, when I had done my first business around 10 million in revenue, and I got out of that and did a little mini exit, I was in a fortunate position for a 25-year-old in that I could almost do anything that I wanted to do except for nothing. So I had enough going on that I had lots of options, but not doing anything. I wasn't rich enough to do nothing for the rest of my life or any of that sort of stuff. So it put me into an interesting kind of mindset of, what do I actually want to do with my life? What impact do I want to make? And what I thought to myself originally was, I wish I was rich enough to be a philanthropist, like a multi-billionaire who could give away money and make an impact that way. But then I realized that if I tried to achieve that, I might fail. And then essentially my whole life would have been wasted. So I thought to myself, I wonder how I could build an accelerator where we develop entrepreneurs who stand out, scale up, and make a positive impact in the world. And if I could get 10,000 companies to each become micro philanthropists, doing good in the world, using the business as a force for good, raising funds, improving the way they run the business, all of those kind of things, then the impact of doing that across 10,000 businesses would actually be greater than being a philanthropist who could give away a fortune. And actually it shares the burden, it shares the responsibility of finding the right things on the ground. And it became, in my mind, it became a much better solution to make an impact in the world by developing entrepreneurs that stand out, scale up, and make a positive impact.
I love that idea of kind of really kind of collaborating with other organizations and people to fulfill your purpose. I think that's a great way of looking at the world, especially the world we live in right now. And going back to kind of first principles as well, what are some of the first principles that you go back to when you're in periods like this?
So for me, I know that the reason people come to us is they want to accelerate their entrepreneur journey. So they want to tune into their mountain of value and get insights around what it is that they do that's very valuable. That's phase one. So we call that understanding the mountain of value. They want to develop a concept that's going to that will stand out and scale up. And then they want to accelerate their entrepreneur journey by standing out, scaling up, and making a big impact in the world. So for us, the more we get back to the first principles of helping people to do that, whether it be on Zoom or through software or learning management systems or having independent coaches or having dashboards that people can download and use, whatever it is that we do, it's around those kind of ideas. So one of my other tech startups is a company called scoreup.com. And essentially it's assisting small businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, to leverage the same marketing approach that won Donald Trump the last election, the Cambridge Analytica approach. So Cambridge Analytica did hyper-targeted data-driven marketing. It's a very sophisticated marketing approach, which is actually criticized for being too powerful. I thought, well, that's an interesting approach to marketing. What I really want is for entrepreneurs not to fall behind. Big companies can afford to do that type of marketing. How do we make that marketing available for small companies? Once again, it's about helping entrepreneurs to stand out, scale up, and make an impact.
And it's getting really close to that customer, isn't it? And understanding kind of, again, their drivers there. So we've established that kind of reset phase. You're now at the point where you've gone back to first principles. You're back to the reason why you started the business. Now we start to look at Reinvention.
Yiannis, there's one more thing that I really want to say about the reset phase, if we can.
Well, let's go back.
It's the mindset, the entrepreneur mindset. You have to reset your head. So if I like to imagine that the entrepreneurial brain has 3 settings and 3 modes that you could be operating in. So mode number 1 is what I call the reptile mode, which is fight, flight, freak out, freeze, send a nasty email, have an argument, lock horns with someone, get defensive, or hide under the duvet and watch an entire season of Netflix. So that's all fight, flight, freeze. So during disruption, that is the default. As humans, we default to that during disruption. So it's really important to recognize that a reptile moment or reptile mode is not going to serve you. You have to minimize the amount of leverage that the reptile mode has. So you have to be super disciplined. By all means, write that horrible email that you want to send to someone, just don't send it. If you feel compelled to write a scathing post on Facebook about the world and all the everything, how you really want to kind of go keyboard warrior to the extreme, by all means write the post so you get it out of your head, but put it into an Evernote and lock it away for a day or two, revisit it once you're cooled off, and recognize that the reptile, if you scale the reptile, if you leverage the reptile mode, you'll bring yourself undone most times. The next mode is tinkering mode or monkey mode, where you're just tinkering with stuff. You're just tinkering with emails, tinkering with, log into the bank account, log into the website, write a little blog that's not going to change much. So you're tinkering away. And the final mode is the visionary. And the visionary is essentially reverse engineering the future, having clarity of thought, having clarity of vision, empathizing with the customer, getting curious about the problem, not defensive about the problem, embracing change, embracing the critics, looking for the opportunity that's hidden within the disruption, looking for the resources that are now newly available, and really kind of embracing change and surfing change from a space of love, joy, happiness, passion. And the greatest entrepreneurs are very, very good at leveraging visionary moments and minimizing reptile moments and avoiding the tinkering, getting other people in their team to tinker as opposed to themselves.
And I think personally, I've been through all of those phases multiple times over the last 3 months, back and forth.
Tell me about one of your reptile moments.
They're
embarrassing, right? They're always embarrassing.
They are. And I think kind of for me personally, kind of when all this happened, we're looking ahead to kind of Birmingham Tech Week, and I'm kind of thinking, it's not going to happen. We might as well just kind of forget it this year. And I guess the lack of clarity in understanding kind of how to adapt and what to do. So we went into panic mode and really kind of almost paralysis in not doing anything at all.
So that's fight, flight, freeze. So paralysis is freeze. We won't run it this year is flight. Let's not do anything. So let's run away from it. So exactly what reptile programming is meant to do: fight, flight, or freeze. Did you have any fights?
I probably not kind of ones which were kind of out of control, but I definitely think there was kind of debates that went on back and forth to understand, kind of almost work through the problem. And then there certainly was that moment of clarity where we went, actually, this is why we decided to do what we did, and this is why we need to do it this year as well. It might not be in the same form, it might not be in the same shape, but absolutely it's what we need to do.
Everyone's reptile has got a different leaning. You've obviously got a freeze and flight leaning, which is, of the three, that is probably the better ones because they're not typically leveraged. Unfortunately, I have a leaning towards locking horns and having a fight, which has not served me well. Whenever I have a reptile moment, if there's someone around that I can pick a fight with and I want to debate it out. I want to thrash it out. And I always end up having to apologize and saying, "Hey, sorry, I was a little bit bullish back there. Sorry."
But it's coming from a good place, right? It's not coming from a bad place.
If I could flick a switch and have flight freeze instead of fight, I absolutely would choose that over the other ones.
I remember early. I mean, funny enough, this whole conversation reminds me of the chimp paradox.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I remember early on in my career, I was very stubborn and I wouldn't kind of really see anyone else's view. And I had a boss at the time who basically bought me that book and said, "Go away, read this back to back.
Amazing.
And really understand when you are being kind of too emotional and you're reacting."
What a highbrow slapdown.
It was great. Honestly, and you know what? He's still my mentor now, and he runs a really successful company in San Francisco. And we've stayed close ever since. And I think that that appreciation of, yes, I was in a place where I shouldn't have been, but helping me get through it in a way that wasn't just kind of negative. I've appreciated that from
it's interesting that this person who runs I don't know who you're talking about, but the person who runs a great company, a really powerful company, that's something that's on their awareness. I've noticed that a lot of the best CEOs, they really, through experience, come to the same realization that people operate in three modes. And sometimes on my team, I've got a couple of people who are pretty fiery on my team as well. And I have to recognize that, okay, so-and-so is having a bit of a reptile moment, let them thrash it out and then we'll talk. Don't fight it. And then I also have to recognize that someone else on my team is having a freeze moment and they're just shutting up and not talking. And actually we have to calm it down and let them talk and actually bring them back to the table. And having an awareness of this basic human setting is very, very powerful in business. It's one of the best things for understanding how teams operate. And the ability to keep teams in visionary mode is a super powerful strategy.
Yeah, I think that emotional intelligence and how to engage people is, for me, probably the most important aspect of any leader. It's what any leader should be doing, really, instead of kind of managing the day-to-day. I guess it's surrounding yourself with good people who can do the operation while you build the strategy, lead people, and understand people more than anything.
Yeah. Yep.
So at that point, should we move on to Reinvent, Daniel?
Yeah, let's talk Reinvent.
Cool. So
unless anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.
I know there's a bit of chat activity, so
let's see if there's
any questions. Yeah, so people are just kind of making the comment there.
Well, which questions have we got here? Oh yeah, Paresh, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, my question was, I'm relatively positive and I'm constantly looking at opportunities. But what I found was, how do you tackle in this situation where when you're speaking to people, you're trying to look for opportunities, but actually there's a majority of people out there who are in fight, flight and freeze. So how do you overcome this?
Yeah, so are you talking about customers or team or suppliers or?
Actually, everyone, because I think everyone goes into their shelter.
Yeah, and Ben in the chat here, he's just put a post here which has just blown me away. It says he's been working in the NHS on the COVID response team for the last 2.5 months. Several thousand people are in reptile mode all the time, and it's not pretty. Yeah. So it sounds silly, but you need to have a rapport with the people that you've got around you, where you've kind of got trust and you've got rapport. It's really worthwhile installing the language in your core team around you. Are we in reptile mode? Are we in tinkering monkey mode? Or are we in visionary mode? And it's kind of important to be able to have that conversation when everyone's calm, that we're going to go through these kind of modes. We're going to have the high highs and the low lows and all of that sort of stuff. And our goal is to minimize the impact of the low lows and maximize the impact of the visionary mode. One of the tricks that I've found for getting people into visionary mode is to talk about a purpose and a vision beyond making money. So when you talk about, like, for example, if I get my team focused on how do we get 10,000 companies to each make a dent in the universe, what would be some of the best ways we could do that? And I might say things like, how do you think we're going to feel when we look out there and see 10,000 companies that are fundraising, that are running their businesses better, that are changing the world for the better, and we know that we created that domino effect. So I'll talk about the vision, the mission, and the purpose. And the more that I talk about the vision, mission, and purpose, the more we get into visionary mode. You can't help do that. Another powerful question is asking questions like, what are we grateful for? The part of the brain that is the reptile and the monkey can't process gratitude, doesn't understand it. It's an app that will not install. The only place that can understand and process gratitude is the visionary. So if you say, what am I grateful for in this situation? You immediately, if you engage with the question, you immediately have to move to the visionary. You can't be grateful from a different part of the brain. You're always grateful from the visionary part of the brain. Gratitude is essentially acknowledging the resources you have around you, which is essentially what entrepreneurs have to do anyway. So gratitude is almost like a muscle that builds entrepreneurship. And then the other one is walking and breathing. So just if the team is in fight, flight, freeze, dropping everything, doing a wander around the block and having a walk and a talk. Steve Jobs was famous for always doing walking meetings. Yeah. And it's very, very hard to be in reptile mode if you're having a nice walk and you're breathing deeply. So those are some of the things that I've found. I don't know what to do with Ben's situation where he's talking about thousands of people in reptile mode. That would take incredible leadership. You would really need one heck of a leader to move a large group of people up out of that space. And I don't really feel qualified to talk about it because I've never been able to achieve that. You might do it through media assets. You might do it through having videos that you're pumping out, audios that you're pumping out, having perhaps software that's helping, encouraging people to find their center. But you'd probably want to leverage media and software in a way to get with that outcome in mind.
Great insight there, Daniel. I think kind of that large scale, that media presence is really needed, and it needs that voice of consistency as well, and clarity to get that message across. But it is such an incredibly hard challenge right now to achieve some of that.
Yeah, Chrissy's got a question here too. Chrissy, do you want to unmute and ask the question, or?
Yeah, sure. I can do video now as well, now that I'm presentable. Yeah, so yeah, I found this all really insightful. I just wondered if you've got any advice for kind of keeping yourself in that visionary mode and stopping yourself from drifting into those other two modes, and just kind of keeping
Chrissy, do you find yourself at the moment more in tinkering mode or in having reptile mode?
It's more tinkering, I think. I mean, I probably go through that cycle on a weekly basis. In all honesty, I think I have all of those modes, and I think I can normally define what triggers them. I think, you know, if I have a real positive day and someone gives me great feedback or something great happens, then I immediately go into visionary mode and kind of stay in that mode for, you know, a day or so. But then, you know, if that kind of drops off, and then I drop back into kind of reptile, and then maybe move into tinkering, and then it takes a while to kind of get back into that visionary mode. And it would just be nice to kind of be stable in that mode, I think.
So a great, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is actually, you know, we're talking about technology, but almost the key technology is the ability to rule your brain and be able to be in visionary mode. If there's one piece of technology that builds great companies, it's the ability to be in visionary mode most of the time. So here's a philosophy that I have around this, which is the philosophy is environment dictates performance. Environment dictates performance basically says that we perform like the environment says we should perform, and that humans are extremely adaptive to environment. So if I put you at Google, you become very googly, and you're a Googler within 6 months, and you're doing your laundry that way, and you're eating that diet, and you're dressing a certain way, and you're talking effortlessly about 10 million users as though it's nothing, because you're in that environment where that just is the natural and the normal thing in that environment. If I put you into a military setting, your language would change again. You'd get up at 4:30 in the morning and make your bed meticulously, and all these kind of norms within that environment. So there's this idea that environment dictates performance. There's a wrong idea that is not true, which is that there are superstar amazing people who would succeed no matter what environment they were in. So like, you know, this idea that you could take someone and put them in the Sahara Desert and they would create a successful company there. Or this environment that you could put someone in a really toxic environment surrounded by all sorts of people who are in a really bad space, and that they would somehow be able to rise up out of it and all of that sort of stuff. The truth is that we have moments where we can transform our environment, and we have moments where we can make choices about our environment. We can get into new environments, or we can actually set the environment up, in order for it to dictate a level of performance. So certain things about environment, let me share with you a few key elements of environment. Number one is the peer group that you have. So having a certain peer group and mentors, if everyone is a powerful and inspiring, uplifting kind of person, it's very easy to get it uplifted and inspired in a regular basis. Herman Stewart on this call introduces people who are typically from a fairly toxic environment to a uplifting mentor, and that one change in their environment will often change their whole life. So that's one change. The other one is transparency around accountabilities. So if you keep your accountabilities to yourself, it's almost impossible to get them done, because you're trying to hold yourself accountable. If you have transparency of accountability, so dashboards that everyone can see, as awkward as this is, like even when you're working from home, I know this would be, Chrissy, have you got someone else that you're living with?
No, I'm living on my own.
So then maybe a digital dashboard. So some other entrepreneur in your network where you could say, you could actually have a dashboard. I was going to say you could put something up where both of you can see it if you're living at home, and you can kind of like hold each other accountable. This is what I'm trying to get done this week. But if you had a digital dashboard and you actually both put your accountabilities, your to-do lists, where both of you or three of you or five of you can see the dashboard, and you say, this is what I'm trying to achieve all week, and these are the types of things that I want to get done. That's pretty powerful. Or even a radical one is to post on your Facebook, like, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And suddenly you've got public accountability. So, one of the ways that I've written books in the past is I've mocked up the front covers, and I've basically published on my Facebook, on this date, I've got a new book coming out. And normally when I publish that, I actually haven't written the book or haven't finished it, but because I'm public about when the book is coming out, I absolutely have to live up to my public declaration. So public declarations, public transparency, and accountabilities is definitely part of it. And then a third one would be having a very clear goal, having a very clear vision, mission, values, purpose. Another one would be having access to great best practices. So understanding how things happen. So these are the elements that make up a high performance environment. And to a degree, you should never ever criticize yourself, because you will always reflect the environment. So you should always criticize the environment and say, it's natural that if I'm isolated, I'm not going to be as motivated as if I'm dynamically working with a team. So that's not a bad thing about me. That's a bad thing about this environment. How do I change the environment?
Great.
That's fascinating, Daniel. Thanks, Chrissy, for such a great question as well, and also supporting us through Birmingham Tech Week last year as well. So thank you for that. Daniel, that was interesting, because on this kind of public transparency, I remember looking back at July last year, where I put a message on LinkedIn that Birmingham Tech Week was going to take place on these particular dates in October. And the reaction it got made me go, oh shit, I need to do it now. I need to actually deliver on that. And that was almost etched in my psyche from that moment until we had to deliver it. And I think that was such a powerful motivator, and something that I completely advocate. And the other thing that was really interesting is there's a book I read recently called Crucial Conversations, which talks around organizations with high performance cultures, but also with high accountability, create people who have this desire to continue to learn and innovate. And I think that some people misunderstand the importance of accountability when it comes to work and it comes to their people.
So I think we've talked about the human brain, and from a biological perspective, if you think about, humans have been around a couple of 100,000 years, and modern society's been around for a couple of 100 years. So we're down to less than 1% of human evolution is the times that we know of. It was actually not a smart idea to be highly motivated and proactive from an evolutionary standpoint. If you imagine that our ape-like ancestors got up and went for a run every morning, they probably died. So whoever was the kind of like self-driven, self-motivated human ancestor is no longer in the food chain, because they, the person who would have survived is the person who procrastinated and only dealt with problems as they arise and conserved their energy. So, so essentially there is this desire to conserve energy that we all have, and a desire to not do stuff that doesn't really matter. And then the only other desire that's bigger than that is the desire to not let the team down, or the tribe, right? So humans that don't let the tribe down, they would have been very, very much the type of humans that would have been in the gene pool. So when you make a declaration to your tribe and say, this is what I'm going to do for the tribe, and then your people around you say, oh, cool, now we're holding you accountable to that. There's something very deep in the human psyche that says, I will not let everyone down now that I've told them that I'm going to do this. Last week we had Elon Musk launching astronauts to the ISS. Can you imagine a more public situation? The entire world watching a rocket that's about to take off, that your company is doing this thing for the first time, human lives are at stake. The level of accountability is through the roof. And I actually don't think it's something you should see in isolation. I actually think that if there wasn't public accountability and public scrutiny and all eyes on the project, I don't think they would achieve it. I think that if they said we're going to do this in secret, it would never happen. But because they're doing it in such a public way and there's no avoiding that, it makes every single person on that team dot every I, cross every T, like just get everything right in order to make sure that happens and that they don't let the whole team down.
And I think kind of Elon Musk as well, kind of the amount of times he's failed at his endeavors shows that kind of resilience built in, his kind of, nature, because you said taking punches in the face. I mean, I've taken punches in the face. I'm sure we all have as entrepreneurs. But it does build that resilience to let you kind of brush it off and go again and again and again.
Yeah, until you read Elon's story and then you realize that you haven't even had a scratch compared to Elon. My goodness.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. And Daniel, kind of, what are some of the kind of stories you've seen where organizations have been through this time of kind of turmoil, and they've been able to reset and then able to kind of, brush themselves off and start to reinvent the whole organization, themselves as an individual and everything else around them?
So the reinvention, I'll talk about reinvention from the ground up, and we'll talk about team sizes. So reinvention typically goes through a few phases. So first phase is concepts, creating great concepts and validating concepts. So I always look for 4 things when I'm looking at a concept. I call it chaos. So high level, what's the concept? What's the big idea that we're going for? Are we passionate about it? Does it solve a problem? Are people willing to pay for it? So those are the 3 big questions that I ask when I'm looking at a concept. Am I passionate about this? Are people willing to pay for it? And does it solve a big problem? So that's a concept. The next question is audience. Who's it for? And I'm looking for, in particular, a high value niche. I want to find a high value niche where the type of person I'm going to go and target first is the type of person who can maximize the value of that idea. They can get a lot of return on investment from that. They can really get the most out of that particular invention or idea or concept. So who is my high value target? So that's audience. Offer. How are we going to package it up and offer it to them? So how are we actually going to construct an offering around this? And one mistake that I see with a lot of people when they come up with an offer is that they only focus on the elements that they know how to do, and they don't focus on the elements that they could bring to the table. So for example, a Porsche 911 is 2,500 suppliers all working together to create this one thing called a Porsche 911. Like the tires are either Bridgestone or Pirelli. Now imagine that you go to pick up a Porsche 911 and they say, oh, well, we don't have tires on the car because we don't make tires. And you go, well, can't you get tires and put them on the car? Like that would be weird. I don't want to pick up a car that has no tires. And imagine they say, well, you can get the tires down the road. There's plenty of great tire places. We can give you a list of 3 tire companies that you could go or you could do a Google search and see who comes up for tires. And that would just be such a weird experience to go and buy a car that has no tires because the company doesn't make tires. But it's the same thing when you go to a digital agency and you say, we need copywriting, and they go, well, we don't do copywriting. We need Facebook ads. Well, we don't do Facebook ads. We need video production. Well, we don't do video production. We just build websites. And it's like, oh, okay, so I have to go and pick up all these other things from someone else. And then I have to somehow coordinate it myself, as opposed to an extremely valuable offering is a combination of the things that we know how to do ourselves, plus the things we can bring to the table and bolt in and create a very high value offering. So when we construct offerings, we always look for what do we do? What do we bring to this? And also what can we bring to this from others? And then the final one is sales. So I said chaos, concept, audience, offer, sales. The final one is sales, which is how do we sell this? How do we generate leads? How do we make sales? What powerful conversation? What do we need to say to people for them to understand the value? And in the early stages of a concept, you really want to focus on sales and not marketing or order taking. You want to talk to people. The technology entrepreneur is infamous for trying to do anything but sit with a customer, anything but actually be face to face with a human. You are so much better off trying to do 30 to 50 face-to-face sales with a clipboard and a Zoom link and an eyeball-to-eyeball situation before you build a web page for opting in to something. The best entrepreneurs are fearless when it comes to talking to customers. And the worst entrepreneurs are fearful and put barriers between themselves and customers. And they try to intuit everything through landing pages. And it's like, stop with the landing pages, talk to some damn people.
And it's funny, isn't it? Kind of, we live in this kind of digital world, and it's almost the default to try and kind of, use digital and digital marketing to make things scalable when you haven't really understood kind of the kind of first problem of the consumer and what you're trying to fix. And it reminds me of kind of Eric Ries in kind of the startup J curve, saying kind of really kind of go and speak to people for God's sake and get close to them. And that kind of, when I read that book, gave me a shock and went, yeah, maybe I shouldn't just be relying on the website and, you know, build it and they will come. And it's such a powerful thing talking to customers. And you've also got to be willing to kind of, I guess, hear what they've got to say, which you might not want to hear.
You've got to embrace the critics. Whenever someone's critical of your product, you need to imagine that they are a extremely high value consultant. And you want to imagine that you've just paid McKinsey £20,000 to give you this incredible research. So when they say, I hate it in red, I wish it was in blue, and you go, oh, but we've put so much time and energy into making it red. It's like, no, if 3 or 4 of them start saying that it has to be blue, then you've got to figure out, okay, thank you. I just paid 20,000 to consultants to tell me that the preference is blue, not red. So you have to embrace the critics, is a very powerful strategy.
And Daniel, you talked about 2 things there. You talked about the offer and you talked about the sale, and those 2 are intrinsically linked, right? But what I see a lot of organizations, tech companies and organizations that are not tech companies, they put out offers, but they don't understand the entire consumer journey and how that initial offer links to more value and more sales along the way. Why do you think that is?
Look, entrepreneurship's very broken. That there are certain best practices and principles that if they were more widely known, you'd have a lot more successful companies. You could totally reinvent Britain or reinvent the world if you actually, and you could prevent people from heartache and destruction if they just knew a few best practices and principles. But one best practice is that essentially product and service ecosystems make money, not products and services themselves. I know that's a big idea, but essentially when you deconstruct a successful, profitable business, it will be a combination of products and services in an ecosystem, and that produces a business that makes money. I'll give you some tangible example. BMW makes more profit off BMW finance than off the cars, but they can't do the finance if they're not selling the cars. So the margin on a car might be 5%. The margin on a finance package might be 25%. But the only reason the margin on the finance is 25% is because they have access to people who are buying a car right there and then. So BMW, when they look at the profitability down on the bottom line, they see, okay, this is how much profit we made. And if they said, hey, let's stop making cars and just do finance, well, then the finance wouldn't be profitable anymore. So it's product and service ecosystems that make money. So when you're thinking about what you're building, when you're thinking about actually building a business, you've got to recognize that the business will one day make profit, but the products and services themselves will do different jobs. There are certain products that are not there to make profit. They're there to capture attention. They're there to get people to build trust with the product or the business. There are certain products that are highly profitable, but only if you've got a customer base. So you've got to liquidate the cost of the customer base pretty quickly with a core offering and then come in with a product for client recurring revenue product. And then you can't isolate the ecosystem. You've got to have all the products singing and dancing together. So I normally isolate this down into 4 types of products. So there's gifts, which are free things you can give away to capture attention. There's product for prospects, which is initial trial products that allow people to build trust. There's the core offering, which is essentially the big bulky product that the business is most known for. And then there's what's called the product for client, which is essentially the ongoing relationship with the customer, the length of the journey. You need all 4 of those categories in order to have a profitable business. So in my business, I have books that I write, which are my product for prospects and my gifts. They capture attention and they build trust. It's actually not how I make any of my real money. My book royalties for the year is nice, but it's not, wouldn't really, it doesn't change my life in any way. But what does change my life is the opportunities that come with having a lot of people who know you, like you, and trust you because they've read your book. So that is a gift or a product for prospects. I put a lot of free videos on YouTube because it's a good way to generate trust and attention, but I'm not trying to make any money off YouTube. So that is the gift and the product for prospects layer. My core business is accelerator programs, and that pays all the bills, but it's actually not all that profitable on its own. Where we actually now make 52% of our revenues and most of our profit from parts of the business that most of our customers have no idea exist. So for example, I own a publishing company, a video production business, a IT services company, and a tech startup that does data marketing. And we make across the group, and the fastest part and the most profitable part of the group is the back-end services that we have available, which is our product for customers, our back-end products. And that is where all the profit and even a majority of the revenue is made, but only because the accelerators generate relationships and pay all the bills.
But also, Daniel, I guess the accelerators give you the insight into your consumer base, so you know what they need and want, and therefore you can offer them with your supplementary kind of services around them.
Exactly. And we can have a quiet conversation with someone and say, hey, we can build you that solution that you're looking for with our IT company in Milton Keynes. We've got 12 guys who can get onto that and start building. Yeah, so it's an ecosystem. And if I try and see it as independent from each other, then I would miss the point that it's actually, my business is a business. It's an ecosystem of products and services all working together. And also because there's so much different things all working together, it's incredibly difficult for anyone to copy it. It's hard to replicate because you'd need to replicate the whole damn ecosystem, and ecosystems are hard to replicate.
It's very true. And what I've seen with kind of the period we're in right now is a lot of organizations elevating their value proposition to one that really does get close to the customer and offers them help above and beyond their solutions. But what's been really fascinating from my point of view is, why has it taken this horrific event to make organizations realize that the consumers want more than just their kind of core products and offerings?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I think there's always we're pretty hardwired to just get into a habit. We're habitual creatures, and it needs to have something that snaps us out of our habits. COVID has been a complete humanity reset, in the sense that everyone, it's going to be hard to get people back to work, to be fair. People are now used to working from home. They're used to a lot of people are now used to waking up at 10 o'clock, and getting them to wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock is going to take
that coffee, hey?
Yeah, right. There's all sorts of reasons that we've also just massively upgraded everyone's confidence in technology. So if you imagine that the government issued a warning that every single person had to wear roller skates for 2 months, at the end of 2 months, we'd all be pretty confident roller skating. And what we've now had is basically the government say you've got to use technology to run your businesses and to run your lives. So everyone in the last 2 to 3 months is massively more confident in using technology to get things done. So this is a transformational time in humanity, and a lot is going to change. And change is messy. Change is messy, right? Anytime you get transformation and change, it's a messy phenomenon. So there's going to be a lot of things that look like they're problems when actually they're transformation.
Yeah, and I think one of the big challenges I foresee, and I know that's going on right now, is even though the notion of kind of work and the environment you work in has changed, and we have got the ability to engage through technology, one of the things that I think is missing is this true notion of collaboration, but also the ability to be creative. And I think kind of that's the kind of bit that we're missing right now from, being able to sit around a table and kind of come up with ideas versus do that in a remote way. And I guess I'm kind of calling it the creativity conundrum. Have you got any advice for people looking to kind of solve that?
I'll talk about it on two fronts. So bringing people together to collaborate is powerful. And I like to scale teams the way the military scales teams. And I know Ben is on this. I've seen Ben saying that he's got a background in the military. So I'd be interested to hear his thoughts on this as well. But the military have different team sizes for different things. So for a very they have something called a scout team, which is 2 people, and that's the smallest team. They send 2 scouts out to examine something and to see if there's an opportunity. And really their only job is to validate an opportunity. So that's a scout team. In entrepreneurship, if you've got an idea, you should be talking to one other person, and the 2 of you should be nattering away to examine the opportunity, and really don't get too many other people involved. Just get a couple of you together to talk that through. The next size up is called a fire team, which is 4 people. And a fire team in the military is about achieving a very short-term objective under a lot of pressure. So launch campaign, launch event, MVP product is a great thing to get 4 people together and actually have a small team of 4 together working on that. The next size up is a section, and a section is 8 people. It has normally a lieutenant and a corporal and a lance corporal, and then 6 people on the team. And actually that's a good size where you have a key person of influence, a managing director or a general manager, and then some sales people and operations people. So now you've got this little team of 8 collaborating. And then here's the crazy one. The next size up is a platoon, normally 30 to 40 people. And I've noticed this with entrepreneurship as well, that you get these businesses that are super successful at 8 people. They're doing really, really well. And then they try and go 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and they get smacked back down. They're too big to be small. They're too small to be big. They're not a proper team. They're not a small team. They're somewhere in between. And about 20 people, they all collapse under their own weight and they go back to being a team of 8 again. And actually, there's a leap that you have to go from section to platoon, where you actually have a command and a communication module with your 3 or 4 sections underneath it. And then that is the next size up that helps to organize that bigger team. The other thing I'll say on what you said, Yiannis, is that I'm noticing a lot of people glorify collaboration, because collaboration is such a happy, lovely word. And it used to be that we glorified competition, and actually both are really powerful concepts. And I feel like the pendulum has swung a little bit to the collaboration model. And actually it's not necessarily a bad thing to say that we want to compete against something. So it might be that we want to compete against the old way of doing things. We might want to compete against an old efficient model, or we might want to compete against another team. But don't underestimate the amount of fire in the belly that a good competition brings out, provided it's healthy competition. But I feel like there's, I employ a lot of millennials, and well, actually I'm a millennial, but like younger than millennial, like, early 20s, right? So zillennials or whatever they're called. And it's almost like it's a rude word if you say that we're going to be competitive. And it's like, oh, we can't be competitive. We've got to be collaborative. And it's like, well, we're going to collaborate with those who help us achieve our mission. And we're going to compete like hell against those who want to go against us. And I'm happy with both. And I think there's some really good fire in the belly to say that there's a game here that we could win or lose. And we want to play to win.
There's something in that, isn't there? I think there's a blog in that, Daniel, competition within collaboration.
Yeah.
There's certainly something about kind of knowing that you're, trying to come up with ideas or be creative as part of a team, but you're actually doing it together and then going away and trying to compete of who's got the best idea. There
are certain jobs that actually benefit more from competition than collaboration as well. So like salespeople, one of the most, as horrible as this is, and as you're not allowed to talk about it, you're not allowed to say it, but if you get a little bit of healthy competition between a few salespeople, oh my goodness, do the results go through the roof. If you basically get rid of the least performing salesperson once a year and replace them with someone else, and then everyone knows that's kind of what happens. And you essentially say, if you give additional rewards to the top performer, kind of like Formula One or kind of like any sporting event, and you basically say to the victor goes the spoils, it's like a horrible thing. You're not allowed to say that these days, but it absolutely works. In that particular role, a bit of healthy competition for the salespeople is one hell of a way of getting results.
Yeah, there's no greater motivator, right? I mean, having managed sales teams, I've seen that firsthand, and it's fascinating to see kind of the culture build and kind of how they react in a positive way 9 times out of 10 actually.
Totally. And there's the easiest way to kill a sales team is to have a socialist communist sales team where it doesn't matter who performs, we all do well together. And I mean, if you want to kill the energy in a sales team, come up with a structure that basically it doesn't matter who's the performer, we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya together. You'll kill your sales team pretty quickly that way.
Very true. Very true. I'm conscious of time. So we've done a bit of Q&A, but we'll come back if we've got an opportunity. But I just wanted to give you all the ability to really kind of connect up with Daniel as well. So there are his details for Twitter and LinkedIn. I suppose you can go through the Dent website as well to kind of find out more about kind of Daniel and what he does with that organization. I also wanted to kind of thank all of you for joining us today. And what we would like to do at Birmingham Tech and also kind of purpose-led performance is give you all a book from Daniel. So all you need to do is send either myself or Chris an email. Let us know which book you want. Put in the subject matter. Give me my book. I want a book, whatever. I'll tell you what, the most creative subject matter, I will give all 4 books to. So there you go. And we'll add a bit of creativity and competition to that as well. So yeah, we'll just go. Daniel, have we got time for kind of maybe 1 or 2 questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
Should we have a look at the chat? I love the fact that Siri's picking up on my conversations today. So this is the issue with the system at the moment, that for the last 15 years at school, kids getting participation medals and still believe that winners need to be rewarded. Interesting, kind of, Paresh. Yeah, that was something that, funny enough, came up this week in a conversation that I had. The fact that actually, do we need to transform education as well? Daniel, what are your thoughts on that?
We massively need to transform education. We need to introduce more of the key ideas of entrepreneurship into education. Here's a few things. Like you mentioned collaboration. They call collaboration cheating in school. If you find the smartest kid and get the smartest kid to do the homework, that's called cheating. In life, that's called winning. So we need to figure out how to introduce that idea so that it's it's a positive idea, as well as it's important to have domain expertise yourself. But it's also important to identify who's the best in the class and be able to leverage them and pitch them and see if they'll work with you as opposed to anyone else. In school, if somebody copies the answers of someone else, they get punished for copying, but the person who gets their answers copied doesn't get punished. In business, if you let someone else copy your answers, you're the idiot. They're the winner. So we need to punish the person who let their answers get copied too easily as well, and teach them about that. We need to introduce sales skills into school so that kids know how to pitch ideas. They know how to actually do a pitch deck. I've got 3 kids under 6, so I'm teaching them this sort of stuff all the time. My son is learning to ride a bike at the moment, and we must have said 100 times, mistakes are part of learning, learning's part of winning. And we basically, whenever he falls off the bike, we say, that's okay. Mistakes are part of learning and learning's part of winning. And he's getting that in his head. He's got Lego and he builds these Lego towers, and then his 1-year-old sister or his 2-year-old brother crushed the Lego tower down to the ground. So he's facing disruption. And I say to him, Xander, the fun part's building it, not having it. I said, now you've got the opportunity to rebuild it. And he says, oh, that's great. The fun part is building it, not having it. I said, it's boring having a tower. It's fun building a tower. And he goes, oh yeah, the fun part's building it, not having it. So whenever he faces disruption now, he immediately goes into, oh, that's okay. The fun part's building it, not having it. So he's okay with finding ways to look at facing disruption in that way. So there's great opportunities at every age to teach them. I'm actually co-authoring a book at the moment called How to Raise Entrepreneurial Kids. It'll be out in September, October.
With Jody, right? Who is part of the Birmingham tech scene. So yeah, it's kind of great to have someone who's has been part of Silicon Canal, who kind of is doing some amazing stuff in Birmingham, doing a book with you, Daniel.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I can't wait to see it out there in the world and people doing a bit more to raise entrepreneurial kids.
100%. We need more of that. And we've got a bit of a philosophical question there from Keith. Should there be a new social contract formed between the government, business, people to form a better society? Always going back to Cameron's kind of opportunity there with kind of a national citizen service, right?
It's a really powerful question. The social contract used to be that if you work hard, get a good job, you will pay off your house, you'll have a home, you'll be able to raise a family, you'll get education. If you're sick, you'll get looked after. And then when you're old, you'll get a pension for the rest of your life. So there was a very clear social contract, and people could rely upon that social contract that if they followed the rules, they actually had a pretty decent life. And mind you, it's not that that's been the way forever. You know, there was a long time where that wasn't the case at all, right? So it's not like something that's been permanent has been taken away from us. We actually had a beautifully designed social contract. There was a lovely period of about 70 years where that was intact and it was working to a degree. And now the social contract has come undone. One of the reasons for that is because we've moved from the agricultural age where land is the dominant asset to the industrial age where the organization of labor is the dominant asset to the digital age where intellectual property, media, and technology is the dominant asset. Very few people understand it, let alone governments. But what you're going to see is you're going to see large technology companies taking on a lot of the social contract. So you'll see tech companies doing healthcare, security, education, and the minting of money. So all the things that we think of that governments do, we're going to start seeing the kings and queens of the digital landscape picking up the pieces of that. But we're going through change. Change is messy. Transformation's messy. We're going to have a messy decade or two. You know, and where there's muck, there's money. Wherever there's some mess, you can get in there and make a great entrepreneurial go of it. But we are going to have a very different, we are going through the digital. If you zoom out of time, we're going through a digital transformation where it's as fundamental as going from the agricultural age to the industrial age. What's happening now is we're going from an industrial age, which is the dominant skill is organization of labor, to the dominant skill is the production of intellectual property, media, and technology. And we're moving into a very different thing. We're probably going to get rid of GDP because that no longer represents genuine improvement in life. We're probably going to come up with a much better indicator of happiness and fulfillment. But all of that's going to take 10, 20 years to do. So we, you know, welcome to the next 20 years of disruption.
And I think that's a great way of ending it there, Daniel. And it's, you know, it is a time when, you know, a lot of people are kind of nervous. You know, there is a lot of disruption. It will be messy. But also out of that, there's going to be some great innovations, some great tech that enables to solve real problems. And it'll be a lot of fun as well. I think we'll all have a lot of fun once we get over the initial shock.
Totally.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting times.
Brilliant. And
thank you.
Best of yet, Chrissy's in full visionary mode now.
100%.
There's the answer to the question, Chrissy. You just got to get on more webinars.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely motivation for the rest of the day for sure.
Oh, great to hear. Fabulous. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this. And yeah, we'll kind of be in touch with lots more going on around Birmingham Tech, and also the announcement about Birmingham Tech Week 2020. So that's my excitement and something to get behind. So yeah, thanks all. Have a great day, and we'll catch up with you all soon.
Awesome. Cheers.